fruits, nuts, and seeds.
Chapatti, thank you for teaching us to be healthy.
The energy that I feel with these meals.
Chapatti, that was really yummy.
Like a kid with new toys. Health is my greatest joy. Come and see, come and be with our host Chapatti.
Hello, welcome. This is Food with Life.
I am your host Chapatti, and the question I have for you today is, what is GMO, and is GMO good for your health, or is it harmful for your health? We have a wonderful person, an expert on GMO, to answer this and many more questions, and he'll be right with us in just a minute, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is Food with Life. Hello, and welcome back to Food with Life.
I am your host Chapatti, and the question about what is GMO and whether it is good or bad for you, we have an expert here on GMO, one of the world's most knowledgeable people about GMO. He has written two very good best-selling books on GMO. One is The Seeds of Deception, and another is Genetic Roulette. And we're very happy to welcome our guest here, Mr. Jeffrey Smith. Welcome, very nice to have you here.
Thank you, Chapatti. Great to be here.
I have a question, which is probably what many have. What is GMO? I thought maybe, could it be Gali, Mali, Ali? And I thought, no, this is silly. It must be a very important thing to discuss, because I know it is very big controversy in the world today.
Oh,
Tell
yes.
me.
It's a very big controversy.
Tell me.
GMO stands for genetically modified organism.
What is this?
Well, you know genes are part of the DNA.
Yes.
Well, with genetically modified organisms, you can take genes from one species, like bacteria or viruses, and force it into the DNA of another organism, like soybean plant or a corn plant. And that way you move traits between species. For example, they actually took a gene from a spider and put it into a goat in the hopes that they could milk the goat to get spiderweb protein to make bulletproof vests.
Very interesting. What more? It seems like, I know I've read about the controversy, the people who are for GMO, they think it is the answer to the world starvation hunger problem, because they can make many more crops and there's much more to produce. And then the people who are not for GMO say there is very much food to go around. There's just problems with the politics and distribution of food, and they say it is not safe. Can you tell me something about it here?
Well, the biotech industry is very powerful, and they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to convince people that genetically modified foods are the answer to feeding the hungry world. However, the current generation of genetically modified foods actually reduce yield on average. They don't increase yield, and moreover, they are not safe. The process is fraught with unpredicted side effects and consequences. You see, the process of creating a GMO, you take a gene from one species, make millions of copies, and typically put it into a gene gun, and then shoot that gun into a plate of plant cells, and then clone those cells into a plant, and now every one of the cells of the plant has the inserted gene. Now the process of insertion and cloning creates massive collateral damage, which can do all sorts of unpredicted harm. It can
What is this massive collateral damage? What is this?
Well, it means, like, instead of just simply putting in a single gene carefully where you want it, that up to 5% of the DNA of the plant is now different, mutated, scrambled, changed. Up to 5% of the existing natural genes in the plant are functioning faster or slower, producing more proteins or less proteins, or completely new proteins. And that means that no matter what you insert, whether you're turning a flavor into a plant, like turning rice so that it tastes like pizza, or whether you're putting vitamin A into apples or whatever, no matter what you insert, there's many things that can go wrong and often do go wrong as a result of this rather primitive process.
Now, there must be some very good studies to show the effects of the GMO. I know there's a group of environmental medicine doctors that have studied it quite a bit. So what is their view of it, and how can you compare and say their view is probably more accurate than the people who are for the GMO?
There's a group called the American Academy of Environmental Medicine.
Yes.
They're on the front edge of trying to figure out what are the new problems that people are facing and what are the new causes that create those problems. So they were the organization that first identified Gulf War syndrome, food allergies, chemical sensitivity, etc. And in 2009, they released a paper saying that every physician in America should prescribe a non-GMO diet to every person in America. They said that animal feeding studies have linked GMOs to fertility problems, to immune system problems, to organ damage, gastrointestinal problems, accelerated aging, dysfunctional regulation of cholesterol and insulin. And they said there should be an immediate moratorium on GMOs. That means stopping the production, removing it from circulation, and only once it's been proven to be healthy, then introduce it with proper labeling.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Now, don't go away. I have Mr. Smith. He's going to give us another opportunity for you to get more knowledge and wisdom on GMO foods and what they can do for you or not do for you. Stay with us. We'll be right back. You'll be here, won't you?
This is Food with Life. Welcome back to Food with Life.
So, if it is so evident that it is not good, why doesn't the Federal Drug Administration, the FDA, do something about it? It seems very clear. Why is it? What's the blockage here?
Well, unfortunately, the Food and Drug Administration, for about 20 years, has been mandated with the role of promoting the biotechnology industry.
Why is this?
Well, because there's a lot of corporate marriage between the biotech industry and the federal government. In fact, many people leave the biotech companies and take positions in the US government or vice versa. So it's hard to know where the biotech industry ends and the regulators of the biotech industry begin. A case in point. In 1991, the first Bush administration told the FDA, promote biotech, so the FDA created a new position for Michael Taylor, the former attorney to biotech giant Monsanto. And then he was in charge of the policies while the FDA was working on GMO policy, and then he became Monsanto's vice president afterwards, and is now back at the FDA as the US food safety czar. Now, while he was in charge, the policy claimed that the agency wasn't aware of any information showing that GM foods were significantly different. And on that basis, they said the FDA does not require a single safety study, it does not require labeling. Companies like Monsanto can determine if their own foods are safe and put it on the market without even telling the FDA if they don't want to. But documents made public from a lawsuit 7 years later showed that the policy was actually a lie. It was a pure fiction. They said they weren't aware of problems, but it turns out the overwhelming consensus, Chapatti, of all the scientists at the FDA who were looking at GMOs was that they were inherently dangerous, that they could create allergies, toxins, new diseases, nutritional problems. They had actually urged their superiors to require long-term studies, but you see, the person in charge of policy was from Monsanto, and the political appointees were under the orders from the White House to fast-track the approvals of GMOs to get them on the market.
Of course, there's a lot of conflict here because I'm wondering, you know, in India, they have declared a moratorium on the GMO products. I know isn't there something very strong against GMO in India?
Well, what happened is they allowed genetically modified cotton in India, and it's been an absolute disaster. I went there as part of my investigations. Thousands of farm workers are getting allergic reactions from touching the genetically modified cotton. Thousands of animals have died from grazing on the cotton plants after harvest. And there's also, unfortunately, lots of suicides from farmers who plant the cotton and are unable to even repay the debts because they took out money to pay for the more expensive seeds. Yeah. But unfortunately in India, the people rose up to block the introduction of genetically modified eggplant in 2010. And so the government said, no genetically modified eggplant. It's an indefinite moratorium because they realized that the foods are not safe. In fact, the Supreme Court had asked one of the top biologists in the world to evaluate the approval process of GMOs. And I interviewed him and he said that the whole process is a charade. Not a single GMO in the world has been properly evaluated. Only 10% of the categories of things that should be investigated have been looked at. But he said that the industry-funded research is so meaningless that even their research should be discarded completely and everything should be done again.
I'm stooped, I can't speak here, but I have to say a word. There are the new governments in America, the Obama administration, and as many say, it's a very big change from the previous administration. Is there a view that they have about the GMO and its infusion into America?
Well, I live in Iowa, Chapatti, where
Yes.
they all campaigned,
Yes.
and Obama and all the Democrats promised that if they got elected,
Yes.
they would require labeling of GMOs as a mandatory requirement.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we haven't seen it yet. Now, what we did see is that Obama has put Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney and later as vice president, to be in charge of U.S. food safety. He's put Monsanto men and Monsanto and pro-biotech people in charge of the Department of Agriculture, as the U.S. agricultural negotiator, as the person that gives out research money and dollars in the United States. It's as if it's all of Monsanto's men. You know, you've heard the line, all of the president's men. Well, it's all of Monsanto's men now in the government. So we've been very disappointed. But what we do have is very good news, and that is that consumers like you and me, we're getting educated about the health dangers, and so people are starting to avoid GMOs in their diet, and companies are responding. The fastest growing claim among store brands in 2009 was GMO free. So we think that consumers, we at the top of the food chain, can control the trends by selecting non-GMO brands to protect our health and the health of our kids, and in that way we can move the market.
So we have to focus on organic.
Organic is one of the ways to avoid eating GMOs, because it's
I
not
want you to
allowed.
tell me more. I want to take a break, and then I want you to tell me more about it, because if you don't, I'll fall off my seat.
Don't worry, you can stay on your seat.
Okay.
I'll guide you.
Okay. We'll be right back with our very special guest, Jeffrey Smith, the expert on GMO. Stay with us. We'll see you in just a minute.
This is Food with Life. Hello, and welcome back to Food with Life.
I'm your host, Chapatti, and we were talking about making some type of a burger.
Yes.
Now, what type of burger is it?
It's a delicious burger.
A delicious burger.
Yes, the best kind.
And a very, very simple one with 4 ingredients and 1 optional ingredient. And so the ingredients are toasted nuts, toasted pecans, grated cheddar cheese, which you can use whatever kind of cheese you'd like, but I'm using a sharp cheddar, and the mixture, the wild rice and brown rice mixture that you can get in bulk, organic in the health food stores. And then we use 1 tablespoon of chili powder. So it's 1 cup, 1 cup, 1 cup, and 1 tablespoon of chili powder. And then I have added to the recipe 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, which is optional, and it adds a little bit of zest to it. So I'm going to not use this, because that's not cooked, but I'm going to just throw everything into the bowl. And it's important to make sure your rice is very hot, because that is what binds the cheese and the nuts and everything together. So I'm going to stir this together so that the spices are well mixed. Thank you, Stephen.
And the great thing about this burger, chapati,
Yes.
is that it's very, very quick and simple to make. The only thing you have to think of ahead of time is to cook the wild rice mixture. Kath, how long does that take about?
It takes about 45 minutes. And the possibilities are, I would say, endless as to how you can finish these burgers. We often do caramelized onions. We make an aioli. There's tomatoes, pickles, cucumbers, lettuce, arugula, basil, you know, whatever you like.
Grilled leeks.
Yes.
That would
Ooh,
be great.
ooh.
Yes. So as you can see, this is beginning to bind together. And once I get it all stirred and together, I will make the patties.
So Jeffrey, how careful should we be about all these foods?
Well, the main at-risk ingredient here is, of course, the dairy, the cheese, because cheese can come from animals that have been fed genetically modified grains. Also, can come from dairy cows that have been injected with a genetically modified drug called bovine growth hormone, which can change the constituents of the milk, increase a particular hormone called IGF-1, which is linked to cancer, and also increase a number of other things in the milk which you don't want to have increased in your milk. Now, fortunately, consumer concern has been heard by the dairies, and it's been kicked out. Bovine growth hormone has been kicked out of most of the top dairies in the country, and the major brands including Walmart, Starbucks, Dannon, Yoplait have all kicked out GMOs from their main dairy products.
So when you go to a grocery store and you go to the freezer section, or ice cream or sour cream or milk or dairy product, does it always say on it that the non-GMO or the certain ingredient is not in it?
It'll usually say made without artificial hormones, or
Okay.
made without BST or RBST, which is another name for the hormone, or RBGH,
Yes.
or genetically modified bovine growth hormone. All of these are names for the same thing. So look for that for sure. And if you can, buy organic, which means it's also the animals are raised on non-GMO feed.
So this is important, I think, very important, because sometimes people will go to the market blindly. We don't see, and we think, oh, milk is there, we grab it, put it in the cart, and pay for it, and drink it, and this is all. And then you wonder months down the road, years down the road, why there's some illness coming around.
You can also go to non-GMOshoppingguide.com, and we list the brands that are without RBGH, and also the brands that are without any animal feed that's genetically modified.
Excellent. Stay with us.
This is Food with Life. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Food with Life.
So now that we're finished making the patties, we will cook them. You can either cook them in the broiler, or you can saute them in a non-stick skillet. That's important. And to round out the plate, we're going to make some potatoes,
Yes, and,
oven-fried potatoes.
and we're going to do it in a way that is my second choice, because my first choice would be to fry them, but since there are so many people concerned with their health these days, chapati, we're going to bake these, huh? Okay? All right. So what we've done is we've taken some, I think these were Yukon Gold potatoes, and we're also, you could use russets if you like, and we've just peeled them, and if you want to make them even healthier, you can leave the peel on. Please scrub them really well. And we don't have any concerns with potatoes, right?
No GM potatoes in the market.
Okay, great. So we have the potatoes, and if you need to do it a little bit ahead of time, you can soak the potatoes in water, let them sit so they won't turn brown, but then you have to dry them really well, all right, before you season them, all right? So all we're going to do is we're going to take these potatoes and we're going to cook them with a little olive oil, and then we're going to put them on a baking pan. And on the baking pan, I like to put a piece of parchment paper simply because it makes the cleanup easier. But you don't need to do that. Anyway, we're going to put them in a baking pan. We're going to put a little salt and pepper in them. Always use fresh ground pepper because of the flavor. You want the most flavor. And then we're going to put them in an oven at 450 degrees. And we're going to have preheated that oven for about 20 minutes or so. And what we're going to do then is we're going to put them in there until they begin to brown. Now, another way to keep it really simple is to put them in that baking pan on top of a pizza stone. Because if you put them on top of a pizza stone, you've preheated the oven for a good length of time, then the potatoes are going to brown on both sides at once, and you never have to flip them.
Oh, that's nice.
Very, very nice.
Very nice.
After they're finished, we're going to take some wonderful fresh herbs. These we happen to get from our own garden, but we're going to take some thyme, some oregano, and a little bit of rosemary. We're going to chop them up very fine, and then what we're going to do is we're going to toast them. We toasted these already, actually, on top of the oven on top of the stove for just a few minutes. Not very long, just a few minutes till we start to smell that aroma. All right, and then yes,
Very good herbs in here.
and then at the end, when the potatoes are finished, we'll put them back into our bowl, and we'll sprinkle them with these fresh herbs and a little tiny bit of finish with olive oil, and serve them.
Ooh,
Beautiful, healthy, delicious.
my stomach is moving now. You hungry?
Yes.
All right, let's start it so we can have some food soon.
Okay, so here are the patties that I've just made, and you can either cook them by broiling them, maybe 3 to 5 minutes per side, depending on how close you are putting them to the broiler, or use a non-stick skillet with just a little bit of oil. And again, about 3 to 5 minutes, just watching them to make sure they're not getting too brown. And here's the finished product.
Ooh.
We've put tomato and pickle and arugula and a little bit of mayonnaise on the bun. And of course you can use ketchup and mustard and caramelized onions and an aioli sauce and barbecue sauce, and there's just an infinite number of ways you can embellish it.
And we made sure that we used an organic mayonnaise also,
Good.
because some of the ingredients are at risk, right? With
Absolutely.
mayonnaise.
Most mayonnaise is soybean oil.
Mhm.
And then when you have cut ketchup, it can have high fructose corn syrup. So yeah, absolutely. When you get to sauces and processed ingredients, you definitely want organic or cooked from scratch.
So I think that's about what we have for today, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank very much our wonderful guests for being here. Mr. Jeffrey Smith, expert on GMO and GMO foods. Our wonderful guest cooks here, Ms. Kathy Dubois and Mr. Stephen Boss. Our pleasure to have you here. Very nice. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Our pleasure.
Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again very soon. We have one more show coming up on organic foods and things of this kind with GMO and our wonderful guest, Jeffrey Smith. We'll be here. Stay tuned and watch another show. I am your host, Chapatti. We'll see you again. Remember, eat healthy, eat organic, and non-GMO. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Food with Light.